Ever wondered if you're the jerk in the relationship? Huh? Chances are you've been there because we all have. Our next guest is a psychology professor at NYU who uses her research to help us navigate those difficult and uncomfortable conversations. I don't do well with these. I need her help. Please welcome Tessa West to the show.
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Tessa.
Welcome, welcome. So, Tessa, let's get right to it. So, how do you know if you're the jerk in a situation?
Well, I think most of us have been the jerk, but no one really tells us. I think you can go a very long time without ever getting that feedback. And in fact, I had become a pretty awful jerk at work. I started yelling at people when I was in charge of an office move, and I made people cry. And I realized, as a social psychologist and as someone who studies relationships for a living, that if I can't manage these things, that most people probably can. I think we're afraid to confront people. We're afraid to tell people when they've been the jerk. And we're afraid to ask if we've been the jerk. It's a very kind of scary process.
All right, this is a great question for me because it's sincere. How do you talk to someone who bothers you without escalating this situation?
It's really hard. I think most of us have this instinct to either completely avoid it, right? So just kind of ignore the problem until it festers and gets really out of control. Or we lead with our feelings. You made me feel disrespected. You hurt my feelings. Why do you always do this to me? And I think that approach tends to not be super effective. Instead, what we want to do is actually leave our feelings at the door for now and lead with the specific thing that they did. I felt like you interrupted me 3 times in that conversation. Or I feel like every time I talk about my new romantic partner, you kind of change the subject. Bring up the really specific thing. Don't talk about your feelings, and then don't assume you know why they did it. I think the biggest mistake most of us make is making an assumption about the underlying cause. You did this because you don't like my new boyfriend. You did this because you don't like me. And I think once we do that, we end up getting into a back and forth with people about why they did the thing, instead of just actually talking about what we could do instead. So I think lead with the behavior, do it immediately, and then at the end of this, ask them, is there anything that I'm doing that's bugging you? I think people don't like to do this, but once it feels like a two-way conversation, the threat level goes down. People are just much more likely to actually have a real conversation around these things.
So the long walk off a short bridge, we don't do that anymore.
No.
That's my philosophy.
I think we can. I was listening to your last segment, and there's a lot of ambiguity around why people are jerks, that I think just getting to the heart of the behavior is our best first step.
I think that was great advice. What have you found that triggers people into acting like a jerk? Because sometimes you're like, they're a jerk, and you never stop to think there's a layer to why they did that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of triggers out there. Most of us have a handful of them that kind of trigger us all the time. So in close relationships, it's usually things like doing invisible labor, feeling like I'm always the one to take out the trash, make the doctor's appointments, cook dinner, feeling like I'm actually being a bit ignored in terms of those things. So when this happens, I feel like the person I'm talking to is a jerk, but then they feel like I'm a jerk because I start to kitchen sink them. So this is that thing where the minute you bring up a problem, you bring about 15 other problems along with it. You're lazy, you don't pay the bills on time, you gained weight, and you never get off the couch, instead of focusing on that one thing. So I think we have these triggers that really can trigger other people's kind of jerkery in us. They make us really angry, and then we engage in these kind of up escalations pretty often.
All right, we only have 1 minute left, so I want to get this answer from you. We live in a world now where Barbie and with the way Eminem's dress is a hot button issue. So how do you talk with any kind of topic, especially something like politics, with family members that might be triggered?
This is a great question. We've all been struggling with this. What you don't want to do is try to change their mind. And what you also don't want to do is try to distract them with something you think is going to be more interesting. So I have an idea that's going to sound a little wild, but just trust me on this one. Every time someone brings up, say, politics, and you don't want to talk about that with them, bring up something else that you warn them you're going to talk about, usually something mildly aversive. So in my family, that's fashion. Every time my mom brings up politics, I say, what do you think about the latest fashion trends, Mom? Do you think skinny jeans are still in style? And she starts to actually realize this is weird. She keeps talking about fashion, but she's warned me this is going to happen. And by the end of the day, I've talked about fashion 15 times. She's starting to realize she has a bit of a pattern here. Wow. It's weird, but it's funny and it's distracting, and it just brings that threat level down again, brings the temperature down in the room. People just kind of get on board with it. It works with little kids and your parents and your adult age children. It works just universally.
Amazing. I like that. I love that. All right. Thank you so much, Tessa. DBL Nation, visit TessaWestAuthor.com for Am I Deny the Jerk quizzes. And again, I want you to look at the book. It's a copy of Tessa's book, Jerks at Work. It's not just for the working class. Anyone can benefit from her relationship techniques. Thanks again, Tessa. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.